I always thought grief would be a quiet thing, something that sits beside you, breathing slow and heavy, letting you cry into it like an old coat. But it didn't feel like that when my wife died. It felt more like drowning in a familiar room. I'd walk past the stove and remember how she'd hum while stirring her tea. I'd see her toothbrush beside mine and have to look away. She'd been sick for a while, nothing sudden, nothing dramatic, just a slow unraveling. And when the end came, it was expected, but that didn't soften the blow. If anything, the anticipation made it worse. Because I kept hoping she'd surprise me, like she used to do on my birthday with breakfast in bed or a handwritten note slipped into my coat pocket. But she didn't. She just slipped away, breath by breath, and I sat there, useless, with nothing left to offer her except my presence and a hand she could no longer feel. If you enjoy stories like this, click on the subscribe button, like this story, and share with your loved ones. When I called my daughter, our only child, I expected something. Not gratitude, not even shared grief, but just acknowledgement. A moment, a pause. But she didn't give me that. I could still hear the flatness in her voice, like I was interrupting her day. "Yeah, Dad, I heard. I'm sorry." That was it. I told her the funeral would be held the following Saturday. I thought maybe she hadn't registered the weight of the moment yet. Maybe she was in shock. But then she said it. Just like that, like she was confirming a hair appointment she didn't feel like keeping. "I won't be able to come. I already planned Michael's birthday party. Mom is already dead. I don't have time for a funeral. Just send me a video when you're done." That last sentence lodged itself into my chest like a rusted nail. A video of her mother's burial. As if I was live streaming a PTA meeting. I didn't even have the words to respond. I just nodded into the silence, even though she couldn't see me. Maybe she heard the way my breath caught, or maybe she didn't care. I hung up and sat alone at the kitchen table, surrounded by the quiet evidence of a life that used to be shared. 2 coffee mugs still in the sink, her knitting bag slouched beside the couch, her reading glasses sitting on the windowsill where she used to watch the birds. I thought of how many years we spent giving our daughter everything. Not just money and education, but presents. We showed up. Every recital, every school meeting, every birthday. Her mother made each birthday feel like magic, even when money was tight. And now, the woman who'd never missed a moment in her daughter's life was being dismissed like a background extra, buried without her only child present. The funeral came, and the day was gray, not just in weather, but in spirit. There was a cold wind that threaded itself through my jacket and into my bones. I stood by the casket, hands trembling, listening to the pastor speak words that felt too clean for the kind of woman my wife was. She wasn't poetic. She was fierce, loyal, sharp, the kind of woman who remembered your favorite dish and made it without you asking. She deserved a crowd, a tribute, a daughter weeping beside me. But there was just me, a few neighbors, some old friends who drove in from out of town, and a videographer I hired, like some sick joke. I had to follow her instructions, didn't I? Send me a video when you're done. So I did, not out of spite, but because part of me wanted her to feel something when she watched it. Regret, guilt, pain, anything. After the last clod of earth hit the casket, I stayed behind while everyone else filtered away. I sat on the wooden bench facing the grave, and for the first time in days, I let myself fall apart. I cried. Not just for my wife, but for the loss of the daughter we thought we raised. For the gaping silence that had replaced what used to be family. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a photo my sister-in-law sent, Michael's birthday party. The boy was smiling, face smeared with cake, balloons all around. My daughter in the background, wearing a red dress, holding a wine glass, mid-laugh. She had looked happy, carefree. That image burned itself into my brain, scorched every part of me that was still trying to be understanding. She didn't just miss her mother's funeral. She chose joy on that day. She made room for celebration while I was holding a shovel. That night, I sat in our empty bedroom and played the video back. Not for her, but for me. To remember that it had really happened. That my wife, my partner of 36 years, was really gone. And that our daughter had really said what she said. There was no misunderstanding. No lost voicemail. Just choices. Her choices. I drafted a message to her. It's done. She's at peace now. That's all I said. No anger. No guilt. Just finality. She replied with a thumbs-up emoji and nothing more. I stared at it for a long time, wondering when emojis became our way of grieving. I didn't sleep much that night. I just laid there, staring at the ceiling fan turning slowly, like the whole world had slowed down and I was the only one who noticed. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was punishing. The kind that presses into your chest and makes you wonder if you imagined everything, if maybe you were overreacting. But I wasn't. I knew I wasn't. The video was proof. Her absence was proof. And worst of all, that damn emoji was proof. It said everything I needed to know. I wasn't angry yet. That came later. At that moment, all I felt was something worse. Disappointment, so deep it felt like a wound. I had lost my wife, but I had also lost my daughter. And I wasn't sure which death hurt more. The morning of the funeral crept in like a house guest who wouldn't knock. Pale lights spilling through curtains my wife had insisted we keep because the sun should always find a way in. I brewed coffee I barely tasted, the spoon cooling in my fingers as I stood at the sink staring at the backyard where she used to weed the little herb patch. I put on the black suit she had once said made me look like a man you don't want to argue with, and the thought made me smile for half a second before it snapped under the weight of the day. I had set out her favorite scarf to lay over the flowers, a small, private flourish to keep her near. The house felt like it had been emptied with a ladle, scooped out and quieted, and I kept glancing at the doorway, as if she might still step into it chewing the last bite of toast. On the passenger seat of the car, the program The Funeral Home had printed bowed in the heat, my wife's picture smiling up at me with that confident tilt of her head. Halfway to the church, my phone buzzed with a message from a mutual friend. "I'm so sorry, but you should know." There were 4 photos and a video attached. I opened one without thinking. Streamers, a sunlit backyard, a cluster of kids with superhero masks, and there was my daughter in a red dress, laughing with her head thrown back, a cake-frosted sky blue, with little planes circling the top. The caption read, "We made it. Hashtag Michael turned 7. I stared at the photo until my eyes watered, not from grief alone but from disbelief, as if I were reading the wrong language. I closed the message, put the phone face down, and told myself to drive. Outside the chapel, Pastor Lewis caught my arm, his eyes soft. "You okay, brother?" he asked, and it was such a useless question I almost laughed. "I will be," I said, a lie I wore easily for his sake. My friend Sam, who had driven in before dawn, squeezed my shoulder. "If you need me to turn people away after the service, I'll do it," he said. "No speeches you didn't ask for." I nodded, grateful and embarrassed, and then my phone went off again. Another message from that same friend, timid and apologetic. "She's going live." The tremor in my hands betrayed the calm face I was forcing. "Are you seeing this?" Sam asked quietly, because he was the kind of man who noticed when I was pretending to be stoned. "I'm trying not to," I answered, and the truth of it stung. During the eulogy, the sanctuary seemed to breathe with us, as if the old wooden rafters were inhaling tears and exhaling prayers. I read the words I had written at 2 in the morning, a list of ordinary miracles my wife had performed without applause. The way she saved the ripest peach for me. The way she remembered everyone's birthday without a calendar. The way she let our daughter make mistakes but refused to let her be cruel. As I spoke, a muted vibration pulsed against my thigh, small as a mosquito, relentless as rain. I waited until the hymn started, then peeked. The video opened on my daughter's hands clapping above a candlelit cake. "Make a wish, baby," she shouted, and the camera panned to Michael, eyes bright, cheeks puffed. In the corner of the frame, I saw a wine glass lifted in a toast, and my daughter's smile took up the entire universe. I closed the screen and raised my voice on the final verse. "It is well with my soul," even though it wasn't. At the graveside, the wind pushed at my back as if trying to nudge me into a future I wanted no part of. The funeral director leaned in and asked softly, "Would you like a moment alone before we lower?" I nodded. I touched the casket, warm from the sun, strangely alive, then rested the scarf across the spray of lilies like a final sentence. "You were the bravest person I knew," I whispered. "Even when you were afraid, you did it anyway." When the others returned, Pastor Lewis said a prayer that got tangled in the breeze, And I heard myself answer, Amen, like a man waking from a dream. As the first clod of soil thudded against the lid, my phone lit again, a light I might as well have mistaken for lightning. I didn't read the message. I put the phone in my jacket pocket and wrapped the grief around me like a coat 2 sizes too heavy. Back at the fellowship hall, I pushed a butter cookie around a plate and pretended it satisfied me. Aunt Evelyn, my wife's older sister, slid into the chair across from me, her grief shaped in sharp lines. She didn't come, she said, as if I didn't know. No, I answered, my voice a blunt instrument. She had a conflict. Aunt Evelyn's mouth tightened. She always had a conflict when it came to showing up for anyone but herself. Her words felt like a slap I deserved and didn't. Careful, I said, more to protect the fragile image of my daughter than to correct Evelyn. She's still my child. Evelyn's eyes softened a fraction. We love her, she said. But love without accountability is just fear dressed up as kindness. I wanted to argue, but the sentence sank into me like a stone finding the bottom of a river. A half-hour later, when most folks had gone and the leftover casseroles were parceled into aluminum tins, my phone buzzed with a text from my daughter. Did you record it? That was all. No, how are you holding up? No, was the service nice? No, I wish I could have been there. Just logistics, like she was checking whether I'd remembered to pick up milk. I stared at the words until they blurred, then called her. She answered on the second ring, the sound of laughter and music spilling through. Dad, I'm in the middle of something, she said, impatience already rising. So was I replied, and my voice sounded like someone else's. We just put your mother in the ground. There was a pause, short and insulting. I told you I couldn't change the date, she said. Mom wouldn't want me to ruin Michael's day. She'd understand. Your mother understood choices, I said. She also understood consequences. Don't be dramatic, she answered, and in the background someone shouted, speech, and she laughed like my grief was a punchline. I ended the call before I heard anything else I couldn't forgive. When I got home, the living room smelled faintly of lilies and furniture polish, the kind of smell that tried too hard to be clean. I set the tin of lasagna on the counter and went to the bedroom, where her sweater still hung over the chair like a memory that refused to fold itself away. The mutual friend, trying to be helpful, or maybe just unable to hold the weight alone, had sent more pictures from the party. My grandson under a shower of confetti, my daughter with her arms slung around a man I didn't recognize. The caption, grief can wait, joy can't. I felt something in me swing like a door unlatched in a storm. Rita, my neighbor, knocked and stepped in with a casserole balanced in her hands. I didn't want you to be alone, she said. I thanked her, and when she saw the photos on my phone, she pressed her lips together. Block her for a week, she advised gently. Give yourself some peace. She's my daughter, I said, and it sounded both like a vow and a sentence. I sat at the dining table with a legal pad and started writing a message I didn't send. I wrote about the day she was born, the way her mother, exhausted and radiant, had said, "We'll spend our lives teaching her what to value." I wrote about the time she scraped her knee on the driveway and refused a bandage because she wanted to see the wound heal. I wrote about kindness and duty and the sharp edge of "I don't have time." I wrote about how her mother had asked me, days before the end, "She'll come, won't she?" and how I had lied. Of course, because the truth would have broken us both. Then I tore the page off the pad, folded it, slid it into the drawer like a letter to a country that no longer acknowledged my citizenship. Instead, I sent the video, the one she had asked for, no caption. Delivery confirmed. No reply. That night, sleep came in ragged pieces, torn by the sound of my wife's laugh echoing in rooms that had learned to hold their breath. Near midnight, I walked the hallway with my palm on the wall as if steadying the house might steady me. In the closet, on a high shelf, I found an old shoebox with snapshots. My daughter in a tutu, my daughter in braces, my daughter holding Michael when he was still small enough to fit entirely in 2 hands. I pressed a photo to my chest and tried to separate the child from the woman she had become, the way you might try to unmix colors that had been swirled together too long. Help me, I whispered into the dark, not sure if I was asking my wife, God, or the stubborn part of me that still believed in people returning to themselves. By dawn, the air had cooled and the house felt less like a stage after the curtain fell. I made coffee again, 2 mugs out of habit, and put one away when the pang hit. I stood at the kitchen window and watched the first bird land on the feeder my wife had filled every morning. For a moment, life looked capable of continuing without cruelty, and then my phone lit with a final text from my daughter. "Thanks for the video." No period, no exclamation, just a bare sentence like a receipt. I stared until the screen dimmed. That was the day I started to understand that grief wasn't a single loss. It was a series of small abandonments that accumulated until you finally recognized you were the only one still carrying the past. And though I didn't yet know it, 2 weeks later the phone would ring again, and this time, she would ask for something I had always given freely, but would not give anymore. 2 weeks after the funeral, the house had settled into a brittle quiet that wasn't peace so much as exhaustion wearing a mask. I woke early, made coffee I didn't finish, and sorted through a stack of sympathy cards I hadn't yet answered, touching the script of familiar names like proof I hadn't imagined the life we'd lived. The scarf I'd draped over the lilies at the graveside was folded on the dining chair, its fabric holding the faintest trace of her perfume, something floral and stubborn. I was writing a thank you note to Pastor Lewis when my phone lit with my daughter's name, the screen so bright in the dim room it felt accusatory. Her custom ringtone, once a cheerful tune my wife picked, stabbed the quiet in half, and my stomach dipped, not from dread exactly, but from the learned reflex of bracing for impact. "Dad, Dad, are you there?" she said the second I answered, her voice choked with panic and impatience, as if both had formed a fist in her throat. "It's Michael. He's burning up. I think it's bad. The urgent care said the insurance is inactive and the ER copay is insane, and I need money now, or I need you to come." I don't have time to argue. In the background someone, maybe a nurse, maybe a neighbor, said something about forms, and a child whimpered, a small sound that cracked something brittle in my chest. She didn't say hello, didn't say she was sorry for the timing, didn't say she regretted anything. Her words were a shopping list thrown at a cashier who'd better keep up, and yet my whole body raced to the register, muscles ready to pay whatever it cost. "What happened?" I asked, keeping my voice level, because if I let the tremor out it would turn into an earthquake. "Since when?" She blew air through her nose, the way she did when she felt challenged. "He started coughing last night, then the fever spiked this morning. He's listless, Dad. He won't drink. I can't think. I just need help." There was a silence I didn't fill, and she sensed it like a dog senses weather. "Please," she added, but even that word sounded like a password to a door she assumed I'd always open. "The hospital's asking about an emergency contact. I put your number. Don't make me beg." My mouth tasted like old coins. I had begged her 2 weeks earlier, without using the word, and she had stepped over my plea like a crack in the sidewalk. "You want to talk about begging?" I said, and the room sharpened around me, lines drawn where smudges had been. 2 Saturdays ago I stood by your mother's casket and asked for your presence. I asked for an ounce of respect. You told me, Mom is already dead. Send me a video when you're done. You didn't have time. She groaned, incredulous. "Dad, don't do this. Don't make grief into a weapon. This is about Michael. You can yell at me later." "I'm not yelling," I answered, surprised to hear how calm I sounded, like someone walking a beam and refusing to look down. "I'm telling you that I can't help you this time." The sentence tasted like ash and relief at once. I had said the unthinkable, and the ceiling did not collapse. She went silent, then came back swinging. "You can't help your own grandson? Are you hearing yourself? What kind of man, what kind of father says that?" Her voice rose and cracked, jagged with outrage that I had stepped out of my assigned role. "You're wicked," she spat, the words so ugly in her mouth it echoed. "You're selfish and small and vindictive. Mom would be ashamed of you." I closed my eyes and let her words clang around the room until the sound dulled. "Your mother would expect accountability," I said. "She taught us that love without respect is just obligation dressed in nicer clothes. I won't keep paying bills on a house you keep burning down." "God, you're dramatic," she said, and then the line filled with a scuffle, shuffling papers, the slam of a car door, the sound of Michael coughing hard enough to scrape. "Fine," she snapped. "Forget it." And before I could answer something measured or foolish, she hung up. I stood there with the phone hot in my hand, the apartment suddenly too small for the decision I had just made. My chest was tight, not with panic, but with the unfamiliar weight of a boundary reinforced from the inside. The knock on my front door made me flinch. It was Sam, holding a brown paper bag and 2 coffees. "You weren't answering my texts," he said. I figured a man needed breakfast brought to him on a day that feels like a cliff. I stepped back to let him in, and that was enough invitation for the words to pour out. I told him everything. The fever, the money, the ask, the no. He set the bag down and studied my face like a map he'd driven before. "So you told her no?" he said softly, not a question. I told her no. I repeated, and it felt both noble and monstrous in my mouth. Sam rubbed a hand over his jaw, weighing it. "He's your grandson," he said, not accusing, just naming the fact that hung above us like a ceiling fan pulling the air thinner. "I know," I said, "and she's my daughter." And 2 weeks ago, she taught me that relationships without reciprocity are a kind of slow dying. I don't have the breath for it anymore. He nodded once, but his eyes were conflicted, a good man's heart at war with his logic. "Boundaries are like fences. You put the gate where it makes sense," he said. "But when there's a kid on the other side of it, you better be real sure you're not locking out the wrong person." I didn't answer because I was afraid of the answer that might come. When he left, I put my phone on the table and told myself I wouldn't touch it for an hour. I lasted 6 minutes. The screen was a row of red dots, missed calls, voicemails, angry text bubbles blooming one after another. I pressed play on the first voicemail and braced for impact. "You're a coward," she said, her voice low and shaking, that register she saved for when she needed everyone to know a line had been crossed. "You couldn't even show up for your grandson when it mattered. You're punishing me through him, and that's sick." In the second message, the tone shifted from rage to bargaining. "If you send 500, I can cover the rest. I'll pay you back Friday. I'll bring Michael by this weekend. We'll talk." In the third, clipped and icy, "Don't bother calling later. I see you now. You only love people who kneel." I saved them all and didn't respond, and the decision sat beside me like a stranger I was trying to trust. To keep my hands busy, I opened my laptop and logged into the bank I had relied on to fix too many of her storms. The transfer screen blinked, the cursor tapping its foot impatiently. I typed an amount, deleted it. Typed again, deleted. It would be so easy to go on autopilot, to do what I had always done, apply the salve, take the wound, call it love. My wife's voice drifted up, not as an apparition but as memory with a spine. "Don't teach her that you are a bottomless well. Wells go dry, and then all you've done is trained her to be thirsty where there is no water." I closed the laptop with more force than necessary and exhaled a sound that felt like it had been waiting 2 decades to leave. Within an hour, the public fallout began to collect like storm clouds over a picnic. A cousin texted a screenshot of my daughter's post, a black screen with white letters, "When you realize you only had one parent and now you have none." And a caption about selfish men who abandon their family in crises. Comments bloomed beneath it like mold, strangers offering heart emojis, friends urging stay strong, one of her college buddies writing, "Men like that don't deserve grandkids." I watched the words accumulate and felt a flush rise under my collar. Not shame for my choice, but the old, familiar humiliation of being misrepresented and unable to correct it without feeding the fire. Aunt Evelyn called, voice full of warning. "Don't you dare respond on the internet," she said. "Truth doesn't need a stage. It needs patience." "I don't have much of that left," I admitted. "Borrow mine," she replied, and I loved her fiercely for that sentence. I couldn't bring myself to send money, but I wasn't made of stone either, no matter what the comments suggested. I opened a folder where my wife had kept community resources from the years she volunteered at the clinic. Numbers for pediatric urgent care with sliding scales, a nurse line that triaged fevers, a faith-based group that delivered groceries when families were stuck in ERs. I typed out a short message to my daughter, the words plain and unadorned. "Here are options that can help tonight without upfront payment. I added the phone numbers and hit send. A minute later, the message marked read. No reply. It wasn't absolution. It wasn't even kindness by some people's metrics. But it was the line I could walk without falling off the cliff of myself. Evening fell like a curtain pulled too quickly. I heated the casserole Rita had dropped off and ate standing at the counter, not tasting any of it, counting the seconds between phone vibrations like a man listening for aftershocks. Sam called to check on me. You still steady? He asked, voice gentle, curious. Steadier than I thought, I said, then admitted. I keep hearing Michael's cough in my head. Sam was quiet a beat. Doing nothing isn't the same as doing harm, he said. But make sure the nothing you're doing is actually a choice, not a habit made from fear. I'm afraid of going back to the version of me that saved everyone but us, I said, surprising myself with the frankness. Then don't, he answered. But also don't harden so much you forget how to bend. I promised him I would try to be a tree and not a wall, even as both felt like nonsense metaphors in a day filled with concrete decisions. I took a shower to wash off the static of other people's expectations and stood there until the water ran lukewarm. When I stepped out, the mirror offered me a face I recognized only in outline. Same jaw, same grief-thinned cheeks, new steadiness around the eyes. I put on her old cardigan. A ridiculous habit that made me feel like courage could be absorbed through the skin, and sat in the living room with the box of snapshots again. I pulled out a photo of Michael on my shoulders at the zoo, his hands in my hair, his grin fierce with the joy of being above the adults for once. I am not abandoning you, I said into the room. I'm refusing the terms your mother keeps setting. It felt like treason and truth together, two notes that clashed and still somehow made music. The phone, which I had placed face down on the coffee table like a boundary in miniature, buzzed and skittered against the wood. I didn't reach for it right away. I breathed, counted, and then glanced at the screen. It wasn't her. It was a number I didn't recognize with the hospital's area code, the preview line reading, "This is the emergency department calling regarding," and then the text cut off. My chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with pride or principle. I picked it up, felt the gravity of everything I'd chosen and everything I hadn't, and hovered over the accept button while the phone vibrated like a trapped bird in my hand. Outside, a siren wailed somewhere far enough to be ignorable, close enough to be a headline. I drew a breath that seemed to ask the air for permission, and the call kept ringing, patient and insistent, as if the night itself had decided to ask me what kind of man I really was. I answered the hospital call because the ring had the slow insistence of a door you can't pretend you don't hear. A nurse introduced herself as Carla from the emergency department, her voice steady in a way that told me she had already walked through worse storms today. She asked if I was the emergency contact for Michael and if I could confirm basic information. I did, throat dry. She said he had a high fever and dehydration, that the doctor recommended fluids and tests, and that his mother had stepped into the hallway to take calls. We can proceed under physician judgment, she added, careful and legal. But if you consent to the plan, it helps. I pictured the boy's hot forehead, the weight of his sleep on my shoulder last summer, and said, do what you need to do to make him better. The relief in her, thank you, landed like a cool cloth, and then the line went silent except for the sound of the hospital breathing in and out. Within minutes, my phone lit again, my daughter's name pressed over a block of text that spilled like a knocked-over drink. How dare you talk to them? You don't get to play the hero after you left us hanging. I typed that the nurse had called because I was listed and that I had given consent for fluids and tests. I added the numbers I'd sent earlier for clinics that would help with costs. She replied in under 10 seconds, I don't need your little handouts. I need you to step up. You're wicked, Dad. Wicked and selfish. I set the phone face down and stared at the kitchen tiles until their pattern blurred. The word wicked had an old, smoky taste to it, like something dragged from a church basement to be used as a weapon, and I hated that she knew it would cut. The phone buzzed again with a voicemail this time, her anger recorded and permanent, and I didn't press play. I made myself sit, hands flat on the table, and count backwards from 50 like the grief counselor had told my wife to do on bad chemo days. By 30, my thoughts were a tangle. The scarf on the grave, the empty pew where my daughter should have been, the video I had sent like a man mailing a piece of his heart because someone asked for proof it existed. By 10, I found a cold clarity I hadn't trusted in years. I could love my grandson fiercely and still refuse to be my daughter's emergency exit every time she set a fire. I could authorize care and still say no to the financial choreography she used to make me twirl on command. I poured coffee I didn't want and drank 3 sips just to prove the cup was mine to control. And when I looked up, the kitchen window had turned the day into a dull mirror reflecting a man I was still learning to be. The public storm arrived next, fast and theatrical. A cousin sent me a screenshot of a live video from the hospital hallway, my daughter's face puffy from crying and fury, a surgical mask pulled under her chin like a prop. Some men will watch their family suffer to make a point, she said to the audience she had carefully cultivated over the years. Imagine your so-called father refusing to help his own grandson. He's punishing a child for a funeral that already happened. Comments popped below like popcorn. Monsters don't always hide under beds. Cut him off. He never deserved you. Then came the private messages from people who loved me enough to be messy about it. My neighbor Rita demanding, "Tell me where you are and what you need." Aunt Evelyn warning, "Don't you dare fight this online." And Sam texting, "I'm outside. Let me in or I'm coming through the hedges." I let him in because he would have made good on the hedge threat, and because my chest felt like it needed another person's breathing to remember the rhythm. Sam listened while I explained the nurse's call and my daughter's tirade, his jaw working a quiet argument with itself. "I'll drive," he said when I ran out of words. "You don't have to go in. We can just sit in the parking lot and make sure the night doesn't swallow the boy." I almost said no because I feared what being that near would do to my resolve, but I nodded instead. The hospital looked like all hospitals look at dusk, too bright and too tired at the same time. We parked under a buzzing light that made our hands look older. I told Sam I would go in only long enough to tell the desk that I was available for medical questions, not billing, and then I would sit in the lobby like a man watching a storm he refused to fuel. "You're allowed to be both present and boundaried," Sam said, the sentence awkward but kind, like a borrowed suit. Inside, the lobby hummed with the low urgency of people waiting for their lives to be decided in rooms they couldn't see. I gave my name to the clerk and asked her to note that I had consented to care but would not be arranging payment tonight. She nodded, unsurprised. She had the face of someone who had seen every permutation of family dynamic under unflattering fluorescent light. When the sliding doors to the treatment area opened, my grandson rolled by in a wheelchair, cheeks flushed, and four-taped to his small hand like a cruel sticker. He saw me and managed a tired lift of his fingers, and my heart lurched toward him before my feet did. "Grandpa," he croaked, and I stepped closer until a nurse gently redirected me with a hand on my arm. "We're taking him for labs," she said. "He'll be okay." Behind him, my daughter appeared, eyes narrow and blazing. "You had the nerve to show up?" she hissed. "You are unbelievable." I wanted to answer softly and failed. "I came to make sure he was treated." I told them to proceed. "I am not here to be insulted in a hallway like a villain in your show." She crossed her arms, chin high. "You are the villain. You could fix this with one card swipe." I shook my head. "I could fix tonight and break myself again for the rest of the year. I'm done teaching you that my love is a bottomless well you can bucket from while you spit in it." A security guard drifted closer with that particular combination of boredom and readiness, and a nurse's eyebrows did the kind of gymnastics that begged for peace. My daughter laughed once, a sound made of glass. "You're really doing this? After everything Mom did for you?" The name hit me and sparked a flame I smothered before it caught. "Your mother believed in consequences," I said. "She also believed in telling the truth. The truth is you abandoned her when it mattered. I won't let you write me into your script as the only villain because the audience claps louder for simple stories. If I had stood alone, I might have frayed then, but Aunt Evelyn arrived in a gust of floral perfume and authority that never needed volume. "Enough," she said to the air, but my daughter heard her. "You again?" my daughter snapped. "This is none of your business." "Family business becomes mine when decency has left the building," Evelyn replied. She turned to me, softer. "How is he?" "They're running labs," I said. He'll likely be okay. She touched my sleeve. Sit with me, she murmured, and we found chairs near the vending machines that dispensed snacks and shadows. As we sat, she slid a 20 into the slot and handed me a bottle of water like it was a sacrament. She wants to pull you back into the old dance, Evelyn said. You step, she scolds. You pay, she preens, nothing changes. You broke the choreography tonight. Don't you dare apologize for learning a new move. Her support steadied me like a handrail. Even as I watched the doors with a grandfather's ache I couldn't pretend away. The fallout extended beyond the sliding doors. A hospital administrator with kind eyes approached and asked if we could keep our conversation low for the sake of other families. I apologized and meant it. He nodded, satisfied, and moved on, leaving me with the sudden urge to run from my own life. I wandered to the cafeteria and sat with a cup of coffee that tasted like cardboard and pennants. I took out the notebook my wife had given me years ago, the one with the cover that said, "Tell the truth, even softly," and wrote her a letter I would never mail. I told her our grandson looked small but fierce, that he had lifted his hand, that I had lifted mine in return, and then put it down again because the line mattered. I told her about the word wicked and how it burned and how I refused to let it brand me. I told her I was tired of being shamed for caring about the cost of my own heart. Back in the lobby, my phone held 3 new voicemails. I put the speaker low against my ear and listened. In the first, my daughter's voice was acid. You're pathetic, hiding behind Aunt Evelyn and your little phrases about boundaries. Say you hate me and be done with it. In the second, it shifted, thinner. He asked for you, she said. He said your name. Does that mean nothing? In the third, a wobble she didn't catch. I can't do this alone, Dad. I never could. You know that. For a second, the room brightened with a flash of the child she had been. The one who had crawled into our bed after nightmares and pressed her cold feet against my calf with absolute trust. I typed a text that felt like squeezing through a narrow door. I'm here in the lobby. I won't fight. I won't argue. I will not give you money tonight. I will help arrange a payment plan tomorrow, and I will sit with Michael if you need rest. I expect an apology for the funeral. We will start family counseling if you want a future with me. I read it twice, braced for regret, hit send. She did not respond, but the read receipt told me the words had entered her world. 10 minutes later, the doctor appeared, a woman with kind eyes above a patterned mask. She asked for my daughter, and when I said I could find her, she said, "You both can hear this." We stood against the wall while she explained that Michael had a severe viral infection and dehydration, that he was improving with fluids and antipyretics, that they would likely discharge him with instructions unless something changed. My daughter exhaled a sound that could have been gratitude or fury. "So no admission?" she asked, and the doctor shook her head. "Not at this point. But he needs rest, fluids, and follow-up." My daughter nodded too fast, then looked at me as if daring me to find relief. I felt it anyway, the private slackening of a rope around my throat, and I let it be without apologizing for how good it felt to be told the child I loved would likely be okay. On my way back to the chairs, I passed the small gift card and bought a cheap stuffed bear with a blue ribbon, not as a grand gesture, but as a quiet offering to the boy stuck between adult wars he hadn't enlisted in. I asked the nurse to give it to him without mentioning me, and she smiled like she had filed me under complicated but trying. Outside the unit, my daughter cornered me with eyes that had lost some shine. "You can go," she said, each word clipped. "We're fine. I'll stay for another half hour in case the doctor needs me," I replied. "Then I'll go home and sleep like a man who has earned it." She scoffed, but there was no new speech ready, just empty air where a script used to be. "Your post will make the rounds," I said gently. "It will feel good tonight. It will feel rotten next week. I won't respond to it. If you want to talk to me, you know where I live." I expected a slap of words. I got a shrug and a stare that slid past me to the vending machines. When the clock on the wall ticked past the mark I'd set for myself, I stood, thanked the clerk who had watched entire life